Sadly, Canada have got to slow their plans to kill people because there are not enough doctors available to kill people. So is their medical aid in dying program really a step forwards into a brave new world? Or is it kind of a modern take on eugenics and the elimination of poor and mentally ill people? Canada! Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining us. I've been aware of this for a while. Have you? The idea of euthanasia, assisted dying. And like you, I always thought what they mean is people are terminally ill, they've got a long, debilitating, crushing, awful disease, slowly and in anguish and agony, propped up by drugs. Eventually we grant them the dignity of an assisted death. Well, that all sounds perfectly reasonable, but there are all sorts of thresholds we might cross when reasoning ourselves to death. And it seems like Canada has crossed many of those thresholds because being considered now for assistance in dying, it seems, are people that are incurably ill, which includes things like mental illness, could be deemed incurable. So depressed people, people with anorexia, and guess what's being discussed now? Poor people. Yep, you guessed it. It's depopulation, it's eugenics, it's Canada. But tell me, importantly, has the guy running the country got a nice haircut? Oh yeah, it's very nice. Oh well, probably they're really liberal then. Let's get into this in some more detail.
Today, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau introduced legislation.
Look at the words right to die in the corner of the screen. Like, firstly, it's suggesting you've got the right to die because it's your life, but also that it is right to die. Of course, it's inevitable that we will die. And so many of the problems I think we face in the world are because of our confusing relationship with death, our inability to accept it, our refusal to discuss it. Think of all the complications around wills and legacy and families feuding after death. Think of our inability to tell one another that we feel deep love and emotion or sadness because we're not able to properly compartmentalize, embrace or understand death. But the idea that death is something that's just another life choice, like, I don't know, getting highlights in your hair or nail extensions, is an indication of where modernity is delivering us to
legalize physician-assisted suicide.
It's a deeply personal issue that affects...
It's a deeply personal issue. These are just not that far from the sort of things that Harold Shipman said. Well, sometimes people just don't work anymore and we have to turn them off. People are bad machines.
The bad machines don't know that they're bad machines, but the people at the factory know.
Harold Shipman was a doctor that just started killing elderly people because by his verdict, they were too old. He just decided, that's enough of you now, Mrs. Johnson. I've heard about all I'm willing to listen to about those corns. Night, night. You can't use reason and rationale to start eliminating people, or actually you can, and they are, and it's leading to dystopia.
Some believe it is their only option.
We are very concerned about the exclusion of individuals with mental illness.
No one should be faced with such an impossible choice.
So right, they started it with, of course, if you're dying with cancer, oh God, but when you slowly and incrementally start to go, but what also about people who are a bit down in the dumps? I mean, like, there's points in my life, I'll tell you candidly, in the last few months, where if someone said, would you like to press this button and die? I'd go, yes. Bye! And I'm pretty glad that that option wasn't available to me. All of us are likely to feel depressed and suicidal at points in our lives because guess what? We live in a depressing and suicidal world, and this is part of it.
The federal government is defending its decision to delay the expansion of medically assisted death to include those suffering from mental illness. It's the second time they've pressed pause on the legislation.
Like, everything is like a game now. Let's press pause on the legislation and press end on that person's life.
Last month, the Taggart family of Cedar Mill, Oregon, set off a firestorm of controversy after petitioning the state for the right to end the life of their 13-year-old brain-dead daughter. Jean Ann Wharton takes us beyond the facts.
Caitlin Taggart was a beautiful, lively girl who loved laughing and playing outside, but all that changed at the age of 12. Caitlin slipped into a persistent vegetative state, confining her almost entirely to her bed and Facebook.
She doesn't even have basic motor functions anymore. We literally have to drag her to the car to drive her to school in the morning.
She's totally unresponsive when we talk to her. Her eyes just roll back in her head.
Caitlin, honey, it's your dad.
With no hope that their daughter would ever recover, the Taggarts decided to seek legal permission to end Caitlin's life.
It is the most difficult decision we've ever had to make, but we just keep reminding ourselves that the real Caitlin is already gone. That's just her body texting.
But the Taggarts soon found themselves at the center of a heated controversy as euthanasia opposition groups mobilized to stop them. These protesters say the groans and exasperated sighs Caitlin sometimes makes prove there is hope for recovery. But the Taggarts' physician, Dr. Kevin DeBacker, disagrees.
The sounds and movements that Caitlin makes are caused by random synapses firing in what's left of her brain tissue as a response to atmospheric changes, like it being cold in a restaurant or her mother bursting into a room, even though there is a little thing called privacy.
Dr. DeBacker believes euthanasia is a humane way to end Caitlin's suffering.
We give her one painless injection, and that's it. Her eyes may flutter a bit, or she may murmur, "Are you for real killing me right now?" But then her struggle will finally be over.
Back at the Taggart home, the family is already preparing for life without Caitlin.
It's hard, but we know we're making the right decision. Her organs can help other children. We can give her eyes to someone who would actually use them to read a book.
I have cramps. And I don't even...
What would you tell other parents?
I want parents out there to go home tonight and hug their kids and be thankful they don't have such a piss-poor attitude.
For Beyond the Facts, I'm Jean Ann Wharton.
3 days ago, Caitlin's life was legally ended. Caitlin, by the way, was the first Oregon resident to undergo the procedure since 2009, when a dentist had his receptionist euthanized after she was unable to perform any function other than eating all the candy in the waiting room.
A recent study from the Centers for Disease Control finds that over 100 million children are being exposed to harmful levels of stupidity in their own homes. Hear the debate about secondhand ignorance on the next In the Know.
Legalisation of MAID brought to the fore some disturbing moral calculations, particularly with its expansion in 2019 to include individuals whose deaths aren't reasonably foreseeable. That's everyone. This change opened the floodgates for people with disabilities to apply to die rather than survive on meagre benefits. Euthanasia in Canada represents the cynical endgame of social provisioning within the brutal logic of late-stage capitalism. We'll starve you of the funding you need to live a dignified life, demand you pay back pandemic aid you applied for in good faith, and if you don't like it, well, why don't you just kill yourself? That's the language of the state now.